In the year 2000, Sony released the PlayStation 2, Google became a verb, and webcams crept into our bedrooms. 20 years later, right around the time of the release of The Invisible Man, the UK went into its first lockdown due to the COVID-19 virus.
You already know my name. And you can see that I'm a machine.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Yes.
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast. I'm Anna Bogutska, your podcast host. I'm a critic and the author of Feeding the Monster. And in this series of the Final Girls podcast, I'm journeying through the intersections of horror and technology, from robots through to tech bros and AI-generated villains. On this series of the show, we're deep diving into machines. Every episode, I'm joined by a guest to discuss a film or two and how it captures our fears and anxieties around technology and the place it holds in our lives. This week, we're stripping it all back, literally, with a look at two very different takes on invisibility, male ego, and coercion. First up, Paul Verhoeven's Hollow Man, and then Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man. Both films hinge on the same core sci-fi concept, a reimagining of H.G.Wells' classic novel where a scientist discovers invisibility, subjects himself to it, and is driven mad after he disappears. But what each film does with this idea reveals a lot about the era it comes from. In Hollow Man, early 2000s arrogance and misogyny are dialed up to 11. While in The Invisible Man, released 2 decades later, invisibility becomes a metaphor for abuse, gaslighting, and the ways technology can be weaponized to isolate, control, and torture someone. If you wish, you can go back in this feed and listen to my conversation with writer-director Leigh Whannell about this film. And as ever, if you haven't seen either one of these yet, consider this your spoiler warning. Joining me this week is BFI's cultural program manager and friend of the show, Ruby McGuigan. You'll have heard her previously in the series talking about a very different film, 2001, A Space Odyssey. Remember to subscribe and review the podcast if you enjoyed this episode or indeed this series. And you can see what are the films I've been covering or will be discussing over the next few months over on our Letterboxd page, which is linked in the show notes. And do tell me what you'd do if you had the power to be invisible by dropping me a line at hello@thefinalgirls.co.uk. And if you want to support the podcast, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefinalgirls. And with all that said, please enjoy our conversation about Hollow Man and The Invisible Man. I'm going to try to keep my coughing to a minimum.
Yeah, it does somewhat undermine the sexy raspy voice. If you're like hacking up your lungs all over the microphone.
That's sexy. Tuberculosis is sexy.
That's a very specific fetish that I don't share.
So, Ruby.
Hi.
Ruby McGuigan.
Hello.
Hello. I'm not going to ask you about what your relationship with tech is because we did that last time we spoke.
I've already been on this series.
Yeah.
By popular demand. Or desperation.
Why not both? Actually, it was your demand. You demanded to talk about Hollow Man and The Invisible Man.
Well, what happened there is I hadn't watched Hollow Man for a while. And now I have, and I regret.
Well, last time we spoke about a Stanley Kubrick film, and now we're talking about a Paul Verhoeven film. So, really,
we
it's
love
your
white
fault.
men.
I think it's an excellent pairing, not just because of the obvious reinterpretation of the Invisible Man story, but because it's a really terrible film and a really great film.
Yes,
kind of
agree
both
with this.
Tackling the same themes. So some of them, one of those films very knowingly and delicately, and the other one with a sledgehammer.
All by accident.
But to break the ice a little bit, even though it's very hot and I don't want to break the ice, I want more of it. What would you do if you became invisible?
It doesn't appeal to me, I have to say, outside of, being a human woman, and like sometimes it feels like it would be fun to be free of the shackles of your own body, but and your own appearance, but that's not a fun icebreaker. So I think I would do some crime, but it would be like victimless. It would be victimless crime, like, you know, laws that are really that you understand why they're there, because if everyone did this thing, then it would be chaos. But
what laws are you talking about?
Okay, so for example, like, I really want to touch Stonehenge.
Okay.
You know?
Okay, sure, yes.
But you're not allowed, like, that's fair. So I feel like that...
Why are you not allowed? Because it would erode?
Yeah, if everyone was, like, going up and plastering their grubby hands all over it, it wouldn't be very sacred anymore, would it? But... that kind of thing. So I would definitely be like getting things for free that I can't afford, like going first class on my flight to Egypt so I can stand on a pyramid, which I'm not allowed to do, these kind of things. And I think I would maybe sneak into like any sign that says you're not allowed. Mm-hmm. I definitely would be ignoring that sign. I would quite like to sneak into the like Prado Museum at night and sleep in the Goya room.
Yes.
That kind of thing. Very harmless hijinks.
Yes.
But like elevated, you know?
Like classy.
Yeah,
like all very arty.
Classy hijinks. It's me and Cary Grant stealing diamonds in a museum kind of vibe. You know, I'm going to wear a Grace Kelly gown.
I mean, you went to Cary Grant very quickly.
I usually do. Also, I love how I'm wearing a Grace Kelly gown despite being invisible.
Would Cary Grant also be invisible in this fantasy?
God, no.
Okay, so it's just a random man who is very deceased, by the way. Going onto an eternal
if I
trip.
Be invisible, then Cary Grant could be alive.
But he's not invisible.
But what's the point of him if he is?
But then people would catch you in your hijinks, because it would just be Cary Grant sneaking into art museums.
Nobody would ever arrest Cary Grant.
I don't know. Times have changed.
Not that much. He's still...
The pretty privilege has still been very active.
The pretty privilege and the white privilege would still get him out of any scenario.
Okay, no, I like that. I think mine would be quite similar. I would sneak into bookshops and museums and cinemas a lot and just spend a lot of time there.
You know, you can just pay a very small amount to go into a multiplex and then just stay there all day at the moment. You don't even have to be invisible.
No, but then you have to like interact with people. I think I would use my invisibility to avoid interactions. Sometimes I just don't wish to be perceived.
I don't think you've read the original Invisible Man, because that's what drives him insane.
As long as I can undo the invisibility.
That is the key. But that is normally in most of these adaptations is the issue.
Exactly. Except The Invisible Man by Leigh Whannell, which is, you know, it's a suit that you put on. I mean, I would love an invisible suit.
Do you know what I wouldn't do is eavesdrop on people's conversations.
You wouldn't?
I don't think I would.
I absolutely would.
No.
All the
it's
time,
like Googling
everywhere.
Yourself. You just don't want to know.
No, I want to know. I would only eavesdrop on conversations of absolute strangers. Like on the street.
I already do that. You keep naming things you can do now.
No, but I want to like
I would go into a
real
bookshop.
close.
Anna, I've got easy.
No, but like spend a night at a bookshop. Like be there overnight when everyone's left. I don't want anyone asking me like, "Oh, do you want a recommendation?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I've got a wish list of 200 titles. Leave me alone."
The problem you're solving here is quite small.
Well, it's a nice life when you only have small problems to solve, isn't it? But okay, so you've mentioned the original H.G.Wells, The Invisible Man. Yes. What is the central premise that both Hollow Man and then the 2020 adaptation are kind of riffing on?
That you have a sort of slightly mad scientist type figure who possesses enough hubris and narcissism to push science to its limits and finds a way to become invisible. But in the novel and Hollow Man, he then finds he can't make himself uninvisible, and all kinds of consequences ensue.
Let's get the bad part out of the way first and talk about Paul Verhoeven's The Hollow Man.
Mm.
Paul Verhoeven, and I've covered a few of his films on this series even, are a very particular breed. Mm. What do you expect of a Paul Verhoeven film?
Something kind of unabashedly horny to the point of kind of disregarding good taste.
Okay, yes.
I think. There is usually some element of satire, he claims. He claims that his satire is like very obvious and on the nose. I would say obvious and on the nose are two traits that I would associate with Paul Verhoeven. I will say I haven't seen his early Dutch films, so I'm basing this primarily on the Hollywood output. But I guess the most Paul Verhoeven of the Paul Verhoevens is like the erotic thrillers. There's always tits. There's also usually a rape scene. Make of that what you will.
There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of violence. I have a soft spot for his American output, like RoboCop or Starship Troopers, because I think he bludgeons home his themes, if there are any themes.
Yes.
As much as he's interested in sex, I don't know if this is Hollywood influencing him or him being just a very blunt instrument in a blunt machine like Hollywood. But with Showgirls and with this, it's not just on the nose, it's tacky. It's crass.
It's crass. It's crass. It's crude.
So the erotic is just completely non-existent.
Well, yeah, so that's what I was going to say in response is, despite the fact that he is, preoccupied, if not obsessed with sex, it is ever present in his films. They're not sexy. There's no kind of, I don't imagine that being seduced by Paul Verhoeven would be an enjoyable experience.
I've never thought of that.
I do think he'd try. Regardless of who you are and what the circumstances, I do think he'd try.
I do think he's very, very concerned with the body. And the two most excessive and extreme things that can happen to a body are pleasure and pain, right? So he's concerned with sex and with violence. The Hollow Man feels like the film that pushes everything to such an extreme that he even himself went too far. Do you think that's giving it too much credit?
I don't see any evidence that anyone thought about Hollow Man at all. I don't think. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's about his preoccupation with the body. I think it's about nothing. I don't understand anything about how this film came into being. It's so confusing to me. It looks very expensive.
It was very expensive. Okay, so wait, let's go back. I am doing that thing that I always do, which is give too much thought to films that have not thought about themselves.
Can I give you an example of how little it's thought?
Okay, wait. Let's do the premise of The Hollow Man first, and then tell me about what you remembered of it and what it was like rewatching it in 2025.
Yeah. So the premise of Hollow Man is Kevin Bacon plays a your aforementioned mad scientist figure who has military government support to pursue this ambitious project to create an invisibility serum effectively. And of course it's a Paul Verhoeven film, so he operates in some kind of facility where everyone is hot and straight from like the pages of Sports Illustrated and far too young to be a scientist of this caliber. So they have a breakthrough. You get the impression they've been working for a while. They have a breakthrough. They've always been able to make things invisible. They finally figure out how to reverse it. And he decides, instead of going by proper protocol, they will go from animal testing to human testing because, of course, he is this godlike figure. Nothing terrible could ever happen to him. So he undergoes the procedure to become invisible. He gets stuck, and then he sexually assaults every woman that he comes across and murders a bunch of people.
He goes mad.
Let's discuss that, because he exhibits no character development on this film. He starts out an arsehole and he ends an arsehole. There's just a few more deaths on the board.
He's added murderer to his bow.
I'm not even convinced he hasn't murdered anyone before this film starts.
Okay, so what is the key hollowness of the Hollow Man?
The key hollowness of the Hollow Man. I don't understand what the purpose of the film is.
It's to show us Kevin Bacon naked.
No, it's tits. It's not. Come on, we don't see Kevin Bacon naked.
Oh yes, we do.
Through a heat detection goggle thing.
Okay, right. You're right. The point of the Hollow Man is tits.
I do dick.
Yeah.
So it's primarily driven by tits. In theory, it is about a man who experiences absolute power and a removal from the ethical trappings of society. There are no consequences to his actions, And as a result, he acts as an example of what anyone in theory would do if they didn't have consequences to their actions. That's the philosophy behind the original novel. It is not present in Hollow Man at all. And it also doesn't seem concerned with sort of science or did they do any research is my question.
Research into what? Into invisibility?
Anything. So the opening scene is there's an invisible pair of jaws that you find out belong to an invisible gorilla. I say invisible pair of jaws.
Cute.
It eats a rat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But gorillas don't eat animals. So straight out the gate, you're like, what is the science of this movie? And then the gorilla's name is Isabel, and it's a silverback, which is a male gorilla. So you literally couldn't even be bothered to Google gorillas. That's the level of research you had to do is open one book on the first page. And that's how you open this film, is with a complete disregard for anything that's tied to the actual natural world and science.
This is a bad film for you specifically to watch because you are weirdly knowledgeable about gorillas.
Don't make me sound weird on the podcast. Okay? They are my favorite animals, but you do not need to be a gorilla expert to know
But you are.
that a silverback is a male. It's not complicated. Why is it called Isabel? And let me tell you, it's not any kind of gender progressiveness on the part of Paul Verhoeven. It is not. It's that he didn't bother to learn what a gorilla looks like.
Neither the
And
doctors
that
or
level
mouse
of lack of care or lack of kind of consideration is just present throughout the script. So that is the hollowness of the Hollow Man. Which is one example, but I'm sure we'll get to more.
I do kind of like the fact that it's called the Hollow Man instead of the Invisible Man because his soul is hollow.
All right. But that defeats the object of the entire premise of the novel, which is if you take an ordinary human being and you put them in these circumstances, how will they behave? It's like a social experiment. This is not an ordinary human being. He's established as a psychopath straight out the gate. And I will also say this is something they do in The Invisible Man as well, which it works a lot better because there's reasoning. There's a choice there to center the story else on something else. There is no such choice in Hollow. There are many moments in Hollow Man where they have these ridiculous on-the-nose announcements of what the themes of the film are supposed to be. They say, did you notice Sebastian has a god complex? Do you think that they basically say, do you think that might be relevant, audience? It's so stupid. There's another one that I can't remember now, but I'm sure that you will recall some more terrible quotes like that. So it's kind of, there's this illusion that that's what the film is about how absolute power corrupts. But he's corrupted from day dot, so it's
I think that's the worst part. Well, that is the second worst part of the film. It's the fact that you get an actor who loves to ham it up. I have a lot of time for Kevin Bacon. I think he makes a really good villain because
Kevin Bacon is not the problem.
No, he is never the problem. He's always, in fact, the solution, except for this film. But Sebastian starts off as a sociopath who seemingly everybody just allows to get away with everything. And I kept questioning it throughout the film. I'm like, is it just because he's hot, like Kevin Bacon? Or is it just because he's genius level smart? Why all those things? Is it just it's a Paul Verhoeven film?
I'm pulling a face at you, which the listeners cannot see, at Kevin Bacon being hot.
Seriously? We're not discussing that here. It's my show, so he is canonically hot.
Fine.
Even now. What are you talking about?
Kevin Bacon's whole shtick is that he's sort of funny looking.
Yeah, funny looking in a hot way.
Okay.
He was a sex symbol in the 80s and the 90s. Yes, and probably now.
Footloose. Footloose? You know what I mean. Footloose.
Yeah. Kevin Loose.
Kevin Loose.
I'm going to disregard the disrespect towards Mr. Bacon.
Let's just move on.
Yeah, let's move on. I think this is a rift in our friendship here.
Yeah, we don't want that. Not over Kevin Bacon. He brings people together. He doesn't drive them apart.
That is true. Yeah, there is no journey for Sebastian. So he starts off bad, then he becomes invisible, then he starts murdering people.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the special effects.
The special effects are really cool.
And the artistry of the film. Artistry is not the right word. The technical production of the film holds up quite well, considering that it's over 20 years old. And
yes.
Special effects would age very badly normally, but it's a cool thing to create, I think, visually. And it's very noticeable that they spend more time on the special effects than the script.
Yes. There's kind of some weird jump. I don't really understand the logic behind how things become invisible and not invisible. Like they do, it's very much designed around what will look cool.
Yeah.
So like your organs become visible before your skin
your
or whatever.
skin melts away.
Your skin melts away for some reason.
Melt away.
But that I enjoy. That's like, that shows at least some creative flair.
But then like, the stuff that you eat or drink, do you see that going through the intestine? Does it also become invisible?
Why is that something that there's never featured in these films? I always think somebody always eats something. And I think this is a fun moment where you could show me. I mean, it might be disgusting.
Because that makes sense with a suit. Because if you're wearing a suit that makes your outer layer invisible, right? Yeah. If you put something in your mouth or your body or whatever, it goes inside of the suit because it's inside of your body.
Science, yeah.
Science. We're sciencing here.
Science of women in STEM.
But if it's your skin,
this is just going to be
your muscles,
90 minutes of us trying to work out
how to become invisible.
Scientific premises.
I hope no actual women in STEM are listening to
please
this.
don't. Turn off now.
But I think the actual worst part of this film, the thing that I have very slightly complicated feelings about this because I was watching it and I was thinking, this is so misogynistic. This is so dripping in disgusting horribleness. It is genuinely so gross and sleazy in a way that is upsetting, but then sort of it was so extreme and on the nose that it went all the way round to being camp even. Like I don't think that it was intended as a commentary, but it is so overt in its sleaziness and its misogyny that I'm like, could they know?
Well, I think the film you're describing is Showgirls. Are you confused? Do you know, because they're not dissimilar actually, these two films. Like, but Showgirls is sitting on the tolerable side because it has a sense of fun that, even though it's still very grimy and very dark in places, that Hollow Man does not have, because I think the sense of fun is supposed to be driven by Kevin Bacon's character, but he's so despicable straight out the gate that you really just don't enjoy spending time with him at all. And then you have Elizabeth Shue there, who is just kind of present. She's not a very dynamic performer or character. So there's nobody kind of getting you invested at all in this. And all you're left with is Kevin Bacon kind of showboating, but showboating with really unpleasant rape jokes.
Oh God, that Wonder Woman,
the one that
Superman
goes
thing
on for like a really long time, and you're sort of sitting there waiting, thinking, I think this is a rape joke. Is it gonna? Oh yeah, it was one. Okay, and it goes on for like 3 minutes.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's deeply uncomfortable viewing, while at the same time, the only reason I think that the film is kind of in on it is because everyone else in the film is also very visibly uncomfortable with it and with that character. Like every single person in this film hates his guts.
Yes.
Really despises him and knows exactly who he is, particularly the female characters. And I think using the word character here is very generous. The women in this film also know that he is gross and basically a rapist walking around them. And the first thing he does when he becomes invisible is assault women.
Yes, like within moments, pretty much.
Yeah.
So again, just to kind of come back to the sort of the point, this entire story is, what effect does invisibility have on the human psyche? What does it do to us as beings? It's completely undermined because he's invisible, and it's like there's no time for that process to happen, for his experiences to have changed. He just immediately assaults one of his employees in a way that is filmed in a really, excuse the pun, titillating and kind of voyeuristic fashion. Like, this is just an excuse for Paul Verhoeven to manipulate a breast on camera with an invisible hand.
It made me think those scenes of the 1982 film with Barbara Hershey, The Entity, which I have a lot of time for, that has similar scenes. but those are filmed and presented, and she acts them like assault scenes, which is what they are. Both of those scenes are. And she's been assaulted by an invisible entity, and it's become this harrowing, constant, like, inescapable ordeal that she cannot leave the room, she cannot leave a house, she cannot leave a city without that entity following her. But it's all about her and the character, and you get to know her and see what an ordeal it is for her. Because we spend most of the time with Sebastian, both before and after he becomes invisible, these scenes are filmed kind of in a titillating way. But what's very different, this film came out when we were, I didn't watch it in the year 2000.
Sorry, yes, you asked me this and I completely never answered. I apologize. I did watch it, not in 2000, but I think I was like 13 or 14. And it was in that era of watching horror movies with boys, as like when you're kind of starting to figure out how to flirt and you don't know yet, but like, oh my god, a horror film is a reason for us to like touch each other. And that's the context I watched Hollow Man in, which, having revisited it, is extraordinarily fucked up. Do not flirt to Hollow Man.
No.
I am begging you. Do not.
God, no.
And it was not appropriate for anyone actually at any age to watch. No. It was not appropriate. And it's kind of funny that it stayed with me as being transgressive. And like, I remember being shocked by it, but I thought I was being shocked because these were like new things to me. I hadn't seen nudity really on screen. I hadn't had sex, so I didn't have like a sex scene would be kind of scandalous to me. And so, yeah, the process of watching it was transgressive, and I thought the film was as well. Like even the, you've alluded to the quote unquote nude shot of Kevin Bacon. And now I realize that actually the feelings I had as that younger person of like, oh wow, this is making me really uncomfortable. This is making me really like, I don't understand this. This is new to me. Were not because I didn't have sexual experience. They were because the film is really fucked up. So I feel sad for 13-year-old me actually revisiting it. I'm like, oh, girl. At least Showgirls, the rape scene you can kind of skim over. But the rest is fun. Not so much with Hollow Man.
No, because every single scene is an assault scene.
Pretty much. And also the way they kind of... We could get stuck on this for ages because it's just a horrible film. But that first one, the character who's assaulted is presented as being kind of an annoying nag. She's the one who wants to stick to the rules. She's like the slightly younger, kind of mouthy colleague who he's irritated by. And it's framed as a sort of punishment, like, I knew I could shut you up. I always knew you were a bitch. I think he says that about her.
Yeah. And then he murders her.
And then he murders her. And it's like, who's speaking here? Is it Kevin Bacon's character or is it the filmmakers? Because she gets no character development. She gets no freedom from the trappings of that facility. She just gets assaulted and murdered and punished.
I think it is the unfortunate combination of two types of film at their worst. On the one hand, it's the worst of Paul Verhoeven, and we can talk about how this is the last American film that he did. He hates it as well. He really doesn't like The Hollow Man at all, and he hasn't made another film in Hollywood since then. He's just been making films in Europe. A lot of them also about sexual assault.
Yeah, No comment. No comment.
No comment. I'll edit that out. But it becomes a slasher of the worst kind, right? Where none of the characters except the guy you hate, who is despicable from start to finish, have actual names or anything to do, and they're just there to be murdered. But there is a griminess and a sleaziness to their murders as well, particularly the one of that character that you were just talking about, where he fondles her even after he's killed her.
Yes.
Which was the scene that really pushed me over the edge when I was like, you are really like a caricature of a maniac. Like, this is some slasher film scenarios, but not the sci-fi Invisible Man kind of vibe. Like, it is dark in a way that is unusual for Verhoeven, who always has the lightness to him that makes it fun and campy. And also that Kevin Bacon ability to really go full throttle into a really unpleasant, sleazy kind of performance that he can pull off.
Well, does he pull it off? Because the character doesn't work. So
No, the character doesn't work, but I think it is to his testament that he can do very lighthearted comedic performances on screen and genuinely creep you out with some of his roles. I don't think this is a standout Kevin Bacon role.
No.
I don't think this is a standout anything except possibly for the special effects of becoming invisible. But it's sort of a precursor for the sort of aggressive, unabashed disgustingness that we see almost on a daily basis in the news and from figures of power, and especially from the kind of the tech bro multimillionaire villains of real life, that perhaps watching it now in 2025, I had seen so much of that commentary already coming from mostly powerful men that I was like, oh wow, this doesn't seem as fictional, this doesn't seem as outrageous even, or as disgusting, perhaps because I've just been dulled to it.
Yes, I see exactly what you mean. That kind of lack of... we expect these kind of villainous characters to be hiding initially at the start of a narrative, and then to emerge through whatever means their true character. But everyone who is now running kind of global geopolitics is so mask off like a scumbag, and celebrated for it, that actually Kevin Bacon happily making rape jokes to his employees, and then telling, the head of the military that he's going to do whatever the fuck he wants, is like, yeah, that would happen.
That literally happened.
That's pretty standard now. Yeah. So
the Hollow Man is
what
a
we're saying
documentary.
Is that global politics has got poor writing. It's a little on the nose, actually.
I think we've spent way too much time talking about the Hollow Man already.
Yes.
Let's spend more time talking about a genuinely great film.
Yeah, let's do that.
Is there anything about it that you wanted to mention before we move on?
Just and one final rant. The audacity of Paul Verhoeven to claim that it's Plato influenced, and there's the audacity because one, H.G.Wells is Plato influenced, so like you can't adapt a novel and then pretend that you personally were influenced by the philosopher that influenced the novel. Like there's not. This is just shameless. And for all the reasons we already mentioned, he's not influenced by anything but his own fantasies, which he should see a therapist about.
Is that your direct recommendation to Paul Verhoeven?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, fair enough. It's on the record now.
I'm sure he listens. I expect an angry tweet.
Who's on Twitter anymore? No one. Not me. Definitely not you. You've never been on Twitter. Moving on to a much, much better, not only adaptation of The Invisible Man, but film as a whole, is Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man.
Yeah, it's a bop, isn't it?
Genuinely! I've spoken about this film many times. I spoke to Leigh Whannell at the time of its release. I have so much time for this adaptation, and it's only gotten better with the years. But do you remember what your expectations were when it first came out a few years ago versus rewatching it now?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any, and I don't mean that in a kind of flippant way. I mean that the Invisible Man as a character was not flying high in my consciousness, certainly. I think the last time that I had crossed paths with him was that awful Sean Connery film. What's it called? The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
Oh my god. Wait, who was the Invisible Man in that one?
I can't remember.
I need to.
But it's not a good movie. And then there was kind of talk of there being a sort of reinvention of that, of revisiting all the Universal monsters.
The failed dark universe?
The failed dark universe.
This is one of my favorite niche interests.
That doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't say it's mine, but I do know that The Mummy was supposed to kick it off and it was an absolute flop.
Well, there were so many things that were going to happen.
Okay, shall I settle in for story time?
Well, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is actually... I remember watching that film at the time, and that was going to be one of the kickoffs. Because you know,
that was a million years ago, Anna.
it was 2003.
It was not. Was it actually?
It was 2003.
Probably the same year I watched Hollow Man. No wonder I was traumatized by this character.
I remember because it not only had Sean Connery, who I never really cared for, but it had Stuart Townsend, who I had a crush on for exactly 1 year.
Oh, because he played Lestat in that Aaliyah movie?
Queen of the Damned, and then The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He played Dorian Gray.
Oh, of course he did. Did he wear leather trousers in that one too?
No, he had a goatee, which was bad.
I think he's the reason I watched it, actually. Now that you're... it's all coming back to me.
Yeah, the year 2002 was very complicated.
Why would I have watched this film? This is so not in my wheelhouse.
It also had Jason Fleming.
Okay.
Famous for his Guy Ritchie movies.
Yes.
But anyway, that was... I mean, that's based on an Alan Moore comic, so that was one way of bringing over all of the classic monster IP. But you know that I have this theory, which is correct, where
it's facts.
It's facts. Every 15 to 20 years, we try to reboot the classic monsters to do a reset. It's a factory reset for the genre. So we had that after the 30s, we had that in the 50s, then we had it in the 70s. Remember Hot Dracula?
That's every Dracula.
Incorrect. Not all Draculas are hot.
Not all Draculas. You're just describing the natural cycle of any product where it's we can sell this again now.
But it's specifically with the monster IP, and it's specifically with the gothic monsters, right? And then they tried to do that in the 90s as well, when everybody was doing kind of the classic, big budget, big gothic movie star adaptations of your classic novels. Then they tried to do it in the 2000s as well with The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Failed. And with The Hollow Man, arguably.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that one when The Invisible Man came round.
And now, and then they tried to do it again with The Dark Universe. That was like a more multiverse kind of reboot. We're going to do this organized. We're going to announce 5 movies at once. The only thing that was announced, right? There was several movies. Angelina was going to play The Bride of Frankenstein. Javier Bardem was going to play Frankenstein.
Yes.
Javier Depp was going to play the Invisible Man.
I mean, if I'm going to have to look at Johnny Depp, at least I don't have to see him, I suppose.
I think Javier Bardem maybe was going to play the Wolfman, and then it became Ryan Gosling, and then obviously that became Leigh Whannell's Wolfman with Christopher Abbott. But anyway,
obviously,
Tom Cruise and Sofia Boutella was going to be in The Mummy, which is the only one that got produced. But to announce this big thing, they had an ident that they put in front of The Mummy. They had a whole thing planned. They put out a single tweet of a Twitter account called @DarkUniverse on the 22nd of May 2017, a single photo called Witness the Beginning of a Dark Universe. And it's all of these very big names. Russell Crowe, by the way, was going to play Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I was going to say, what's my guy doing here?
He was in The Mummy, playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh, I didn't watch that film.
Well, unfortunately, I did, because as I've now demonstrated, I'm obsessed with this failed universe. Sofia Boutella was the hot mummy. Johnny Depp was problematic Invisible Man. Turns out always problematic. Tom Cruise, not a monster, but a hero in The Mummy. Javier Bardem was going to be Frankenstein. Angelina's not here. This was the only picture to announce this universe. Nothing else was ever tweeted from this account. This account is still up.
So it's still coming.
No,
it's pending. The Dark Universe is pending.
They shuttered it. It's not happening.
It's only been 8 years. It could still happen.
But the tweet is still up. And it's still linking to darkuniverse.com. There is no Dark Universe. They abandoned.
Is there a darkuniverse.com?
There is.
What's on that?
This is riveting content.
Yeah, I mean, this should be edited. It's fine.
It's just Universal's pictures.
Fine.
That's not very exciting. But there were so many films planned. They were trying to make a whole Marvel cinematic universe out of it. The Mummy is not good.
I have no clue whether this was actual, like, in the popular consciousness, or you've just spoken to me about it so many times. I've kind of rewritten history that I was like, I remember the Dark Universe launch. It was a big deal. There was a lot of press coverage. Like, clearly, I think it's just you who've embedded that thought in my mind.
Possibly. No, it definitely happened. But that is very long-winded context to say that The Invisible Man by Leigh Whannell was part of that. It was not that one, but they were planning on rebooting that adaptation. And then when that all fell apart, they kind of went back to...
So there's really a degree of irony that it was going to be Johnny Depp and then it became a film about a domestic abuser.
Yes.
Oh, not
there
irony.
is.
What's the opposite of irony? Apt.
So it became just standalone films. And Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man was the first successful one, I would argue. Which is a very, very long-winded way of saying, what do you make? On his twist and recentering of the story, not on the Invisible Man himself, but on his victim.
Yeah, so I think I don't think I'd even really talk about this film as an adaptation, to be frank, and I mean that in a positive way, in that it really is just using the Invisible Man hook of like a concept you're familiar with to buy you into a different story entirely. So he turns away from the kind of the questions that I poorly articulated should have been a part of Hollow Man's thinking, and really just tells a story about a woman's experience as a survivor of domestic violence. I think it's a really clever decision because he's making a horror movie, and everything that goes with fleeing that kind of environment and the paranoia that comes after it and the experiences that come after it, and then it turns out not after but during, are so genuinely scary that it's very effective. And I think it's just a really smart way of hooking an audience into empathizing with this this lead played by Elizabeth Moss. But in terms of like, does power corrupt? What kind of effect would removing accountability have on human behavior? Again, this is a villain from the outset, the invisible, quote unquote, invisible man. That's not the film's concern, and instead it gets to really sit with her psyche and force us to experience it. And I think it's very effective.
I agree with everything except one thing. In that, well, I would just delve on that a little bit, in that I do think that it is an adaptation, but I think it does what most adaptations fail to do, which is actually genuinely twist it around and focus sincerely and really develop a different character's experience of the story, and also pick up the story from a different point in time. So once the technology is created, once the invisibility element is achieved, that question of, does it mean ultimate power? Does it corrupt? The answer is always yes, right? And that's what those original novels were exploring. But once we already know that the answer is yes, what else happens afterwards? Who else? Who is the victim of that power? What does that experience look like from a different angle? And I think those are the great reimaginings. I don't really want to see another version of The Mummy. I don't really want to see another version of Dracula. Give me something that actually asks a different question of a text that has been reinterpreted and adapted and twisted in so many different ways. And I think even the title changes its meaning, because it is about a sort of invisible or the difficulty of believing in abuse that you cannot see, and in terrorizing someone when nobody else is in the room. With the difference that with Cecilia, Elizabeth Moss's character, we're always in the room with her. The film really stays with her, and we don't. And we'll talk about this a bit later on. The really pointed choice of us not actually seeing Adrian, the invisible man in question, until literally the final scene of the film.
But I think you've also landed on something that is one of the keys to the film's success, because there is a different horror film they could have made here, which would have sat in the ambiguity of Cecilia's experience. So the plot follows her. The opening scene, which is really one of the scariest scenes in the film, is her escaping from her the home she shares with her abusive partner. So obviously there's a trauma straight from the outset, and then the rest of the film we spend with kind of somebody who's just experienced a trauma and is trying to come to terms with it and is trying to readjust to the world. And instead of it asking, is what she's experiencing real? There's never a question. Like, we know from very early on that this guy is invisible and he is stalking and harassing her. So you could have done a very effective, scary story that's like a psychological thriller that you don't really know, God, what's real, what's not. Instead, you know what's real. And what's horrifying about it is like, this is what happens in the real world. It's very confronting, which I think is a brave choice.
It is also doing the thing that horror is uniquely good at getting away with, which is making a incredibly tense and watchable, and let's face it, like really commercial film that is about a subject that many people still will very happily ignore, and will very happily ignore when it's right in front of them, and will disbelieve the people, particularly women, who come forward with or try to come out of abusive relationships or abusive domestic situations. The film quite eloquently shows us how Cecilia's experience is constantly being put into question.
But you said why, and there's a reason you said why, is that it treats everyone with empathy and understanding who she comes into contact with. We get why people don't believe her, because she is paranoid about going out in public, and she is having nightmares about the experiences that she's had. And when she comes to them with an experience that on paper defies the natural world as they know it, and she's showing signs of being in an unstable place for all the reasons that are very understandable, of course they assume that she's misunderstood. So I think that's again, it's a bold choice to not make a clear-cut villain of everyone who doesn't believe her, and instead it forces the audience to ask what they would do in that scenario and put themselves in both Cecilia's shoes and those of kind of the characters around her.
The other kind of thing that it does, going back to my earlier point about horror's uniquely positioned to do this, to sneak in these themes in a really, really point blank way, because there's several mechanisms of abuse, particularly domestic abuse, that are pretty much used for narrative purposes, which I think is really clever and also very emotionally profound. Because it's very different to be told what mechanisms of abuse are, and then it hits completely differently if you're watching someone experience it. Mm-hmm. And obviously this is packaged in a very slick, very well directed and scripted Hollywood production. But how do you think the film uses the methods of domestic abuse to create, or to illustrate, I should say, fear and tension?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, not because the question is inherently big, but because the answer is huge. I mean, there are so many different nuanced ways that it does that. I'm straight from the outset, you are very conscious of her isolation in the house. You know, she's in the middle of nowhere in this kind of Rebecca-esque sort of mansion by the sea with the crashing waves. And then you realize quite quickly that she has this strange relationship with her sister who doesn't know anything that's going on, and nobody around her is really in contact with her. So you have this kind of, again, as you say, plot device of her having to explain to everyone the background without showing it. But it also demonstrates these are her closest friends and they don't know what's going on with her life. He's removed her from their world. You have the, again, very cleverly used kind of constant surveillance, which works really well in terms of camera techniques. You're like, am I watching her? Am I watching the spaces around her to try and find something invisible? But it all feels very kind of voyeuristic in a way, the way it's shot. And she is surveilled by him. He's effectively stalking her. There is the kind of like control of her finances when she's allowed to leave the house. There is, a rape plot line that is actually approached very well, in that it's kind of off-screen, not discussed in detail, but holds a real emotional impact and is not dismissed as a minor event. It's a huge turning point in the plot. And denial of her basic reproductive rights as a result. So kind of everything that you can imagine that someone abusive would do happens to Cecilia, but it never feels like this huge onslaught, because it's little things, tiny examples. Obviously the gaslighting is a good example that's like ties in brilliantly with the entire concept of the film, but it's not just that sort of psychological manipulation. There's also a constant physical threat. Like there is a physical presence in the room that does really horrible small acts of violence to make her feel like a bigger one is always coming. There's the threat towards other people that aren't just her. Like, honestly, I can just keep talking for ages about the various clever ways this film incorporates abusive behaviors as just stuff that happens in horror movies. Things that any horror villain would be doing. But they're just all finely tuned.
I think to your earlier point, it's those little build-up details. And I think it does, at least for a third of the film, I think it does actually skirt around. Is Adrian really dead? Or is he really in the room with her? Or is it a ghost that's in the room with her? Because I think it really walks a fine line for a while until it unequivocally becomes, oh no, there is an invisible suit. That is him. That is him stalking her. He's physically in the room with her. He's physically moving around the things. He's physically doing these things. There is always that open question of, is it a haunted movie or is it a tech horror movie? Because those little instances where he fucks around with her to gaslight her and move things, and just that tension that is created around the question mark, you never quite know whether that's a supernatural question mark or an abusive one.
The other really clever tool they use to lean into that is the character of the brother, he serves as sort of the only evidence that she's wrong, but really, like, he is the only person kind of contradicting her. He says he's seen the body. He appears to be kind and on her side, but he's such a great example of an enabler of abuse, somebody who was not only turning a blind eye, but actively supporting it, and of, you know, a lack of male accountability. So again, it's like it plays into the paranoia of the film and adds to the tension, but it's also like, take a step back, and it's an excellent, concise piece of social commentary that Paul Verhoeven could never have conceived of.
There's also, it really pushes there's all of the supporting characters are also very well developed. And I want to talk about Cecilia Moss's performance a bit more, but all of the supporting cast they get their space, they get their time, and they also get pushed right up until their limit. So it does also create this really interesting, quite delicate conversation, I think, of how far are you willing to put yourself at risk to help someone get out of a terrible situation like Cecilia's. What do you think about how the film treats its supporting characters?
Generously. They are, as you say, they are well fleshed out. They serve a purpose in the plot, but that's not why they're there. They are there to add kind of texture to Cecilia's experience and make her feel real. I think ultimately the film is number one concerned with her, and the characters are around to make us feel empathy for her and understand her better, but they do feel real. I think the most impactful scene of the film for me, there are a couple that are very scary, but the one that really broke my heart is when she goes to her sister for help and her sister turns her away because there's been a fake email sent her by Adrian that disowns her and says all these horrible things to her. And the heartbreak in Elizabeth Moss's performance in that moment, and also the realization that he's once again successfully isolated her from the people who are trying to help in a way that totally makes sense, right? Of course, if you got an email from somebody who you have a kind of complicated relationship with anyway, saying all these awful things that are cleverly crafted, you would believe it came from them. Why would you believe anything else? So the empathy for both characters in that situation is really strong. It's very well written and very well performed by both actors.
So let's talk about Elizabeth Moss.
Yes.
Where do you genuinely stand on her? I feel like she is you might, I genuinely fear you might hit me over this. I feel like she's got a Gina Rowland sort of cult appeal.
Interesting.
Where she's never really broken through big enough to be like a full-blown Scarlett Johansson level movie star, let's say. But then her performances are so consistently lauded, and she's such a magnetic and strange and alluring presence on screen. And also, she has really made it her niche to play women on the very strong-willed women, constantly being pushed to breaking point, and then surviving. I
can see why you'd make the Gina comparison, because Elizabeth Moss is very much a woman on the edge. And I think that you're right. Her particular talent is playing extreme vulnerability and then overcoming that and showing strength. That's being able to flip between those two modes is, without it feeling hokey, is her strength. I think she's basically a character actress who plays leading roles. I think the reason she doesn't have the huge following is also the reason I think she's interesting casting for this. She doesn't have the right look. I do think she is beautiful, and I really love her face, but she's not conventionally attractive. She's not stick thin. And so I think that her casting in this, let's sort of, you alluded to it earlier, but let's make Adrian the obvious tech bro villain that he is. You know, he's made his gazillions on some obscure invention that, let's call it a rocket ship.
A chip.
Whatever.
An algorithm. I don't know.
And she is the sort of, on paper, the trophy wife, but they haven't cast an Amber Heard to an Elon Musk. They've cast somebody who is not 22 and ergo a natural kind of quote unquote victim because of the power dynamics inherent in that. She's not kind of like plastic looking. And I could have seen them doing that very easily with this film. You could have had your kind of blonde bimbo final girl who has the grit, who you end up rooting for. And instead they've cast someone who brings a feeling of just a lot more experience to the role. She doesn't play it as naive, which I like, but it is unexpected.
You see, that's interesting. And I think, aside from the fact that I genuinely think she's an incredible face and an incredible actor.
We love faces.
We do love faces. I miss faces. I actually think it's a very deliberate piece of casting, because that trophy wife element would have been a very easy form of casting, right? Mm-hmm. But the most interesting piece, the most interesting monologue that she has in the film actually, I think, alludes to this. And it's when she's almost said, you're not.
The listeners can't see me clicking.
You're signaling.
I know which one you mean.
There's this beautiful harrowing scene where she is, surrounding herself with like ground coffee on the floor in a little circle, and she's, hold herself against the kitchen counter, just holding a knife towards nothing, and she's exhausted, and he hasn't revealed himself yet, but you just know, you can feel that he's in the room and he's watching her and not making a move. He's waiting for her to make a move. And this just completely depleted monologue where she talks about the fact that she's not special. She's not the most beautiful, the most smart, or the richest, or the most accomplished girls in, I think they met in college in the film, or wherever it was. It's like, why pick her to put her through this? He could have anyone. He could buy anyone if he wanted to. And he's just obsessed with having her and destroying her if he cannot have her. And she's not extraordinary. And I thought that was really...
Or is she? Because we don't see her when she met him, right? So I think actually, I love that monologue when I rewatched it, but actually hearing you speak about it now, I'm thinking this is a character who's been through however many months or years of domestic abuse, and she doesn't believe she has any value. She cannot see what was special about her. Who she is as an individual has been destroyed by him. So it shows a real understanding of the psychology of a victim, I think. And it makes her building herself back up by the end of the film so much more satisfying.
Interesting. Because this is one of the films that I really hate to have to do this, but that I wrote about in my book, In Feeding the Monster.
Available in all good bookstores.
Thank you, friend.
Sold out, actually. It's not even available. Out in paperback on.
Don't actually know the date, but it will be out in paperback. What I found really interesting about horror films in the 2020s, or horror films between like the 2010s, the late 2010s and the early 2020s, is that a lot of the ones that center on women, I think, are very, very parallel text to women's pictures of the 1940s, which is a niche interest of yours, Ruby.
Niche?
Okay. A consuming interest of yours.
I love them.
In one of the great film critic Molly Haskell's books, she talks about the 1940s paranoid women's films, particularly how it's a lot about either ordinary women who really want to be who turn extraordinary, or extraordinary women who are cut to size and are proven not to be so special. And there's clear parallels between those films, particularly the ones that were concerned with women in domestic spaces, women trying to break out or to fend for themselves, or women just existing in really dramatic and high intensity and highly emotional situations in those films that were not considered to have like a lot of action going on in them, because they were mostly just happening in a home. And this film is pretty much that, except modernized and much more modernized. And partly because it all takes place in different kinds of houses, mostly Adrian's, but then also the houses where she hides out. But then also because it's this woman who is being contained and controlled by male success. And in that scene, the reason why, and throughout the whole film, I hear you, and I kind of agree. I agree with the reading of that she's kind of been erased from her personality. We don't meet her when she's just Cecilia, before she's Adrian's wife and his punching bag. And I think there's a completely different personality that emerges as well towards the end of the film, because she has to find that extraordinary element that perhaps is the thing that he needed to squash out, that he saw at the start, and then he spent their time together trying to eradicate.
We get that little glimpse of it. For the first probably third of the film, she's trying to come to terms with what's happened to her and trying to work out how to live in the real world. And then she finds out she has this money, and you get this one playful scene where she hides the gift for, I can't remember the girl's name
Sydney,
now.
I think.
Sydney, of course, yeah. She hides it, and it's really joyous and fun the way that she kind of goes around gifting her this money to go to college. And then immediately after that scene is when Adrian reintroduces himself into her life. He sees her allowing herself to kind of be a person with a personality again, and he's right back in there, which I think supports the theory. But it's interesting that you bring up that sort of parallel, because I think melodrama is often spoken about particularly by Linda Williams in one of her famous essays, as a genre of the body, and she talks about it as a genre of the body along with horror. They both, as you said earlier, horror is uniquely positioned to explore some of these issues because it cuts straight, it hits the shortcut via your physical response to being scared to then whatever the filmmaker is trying to convey. And melodrama does the same, except instead of it being fear, it is, sorrow or empathy or grief. So it's
emotions. She calls them the weepies.
Yeah, they're natural bedfellows because they both do the same thing. They both, on the surface, are simple narratives about ordinary things, potentially, but they're always carrying, not always, but often carrying a much wider social critique, kind of disguised underneath the tearjerker moments and the jump scares.
I think the house is particularly important here as well. And I wonder, we talked about it briefly a little bit, but I think Adrian's house, the main two houses that we visit in the film, are really, really a big part of Cecilia's story as well. What do you think about the way that the film uses the house and how it also plays around a little bit with the haunted house conventions?
Yeah, there's quite a lot to dig into there, isn't there? I think it's interesting that you compare the two, because if we again just revisit that narrative of her going from one environment where she was... Okay, so let's imagine this character's life, as you are forced to do. She's the quote-unquote ordinary girl who's brought into the whirlwind of a tech gazillionaire, and she's the chosen one, right? And they live in this ridiculous house with the extraordinary view. It feels very elevated. It feels almost kind of space age, which is in keeping with the sort of tech horror elements. It also feels quite oppressive because you're seeing it through these kind of CCTV cameras and the just this sense of surveillance. And it's very cold. But you can imagine how it feels like being transported into another world for her. And she's so isolated. She just lives in that kind of almost prison-like building. And then the home, because it's not a house, it's a home that she finds herself in when she escapes with James and Sydney, is your average, like very familiar family home that many people will have grown up in. It's like, two up, two down. It's very lived in. There, pots and pans everywhere, and there's evidence of a life. So those two conflicting environments are really interesting, I think. And I think that the fact that the second one becomes the haunted house is really unsettling, because that's supposed to be the safe space. And you've got a few classic haunted house. I mean, the one that really springs to mind is that attic scene. That's like,
oh yeah, that's great.
We've seen this movie scene before, but have we? So she goes up into the attic when I will say, being very brave. Couldn't be me. I'd have been under the bed. Let's just finding some environment where it's like a tiny cell that only I can fit in and no other person. But she goes up into the attic thinking she might be able to find some evidence that he's in the house. And then you have this kind of cat and mouse with an invisible creature, which is so spooky. So that would be this.
And that's the first actual confirmation that it is a real person in some sort of invisible suit, right? Because she throws the pink at him.
I think this is after she goes and sees the suit.
Yes, but this is the confirmation that someone is putting the suit on.
It's the first time we see him.
And then there's still the question of whether it's his brother.
On rewatching it, I rewound it because I jumped so much I was worried I missed something. I was like, I have to let me check.
It's such a good jump scare.
It's really, really scary.
It's very, very, like, the tension is always there in the film, and when the jump scares are so sparse, but when they happen, they're so well delivered.
Yeah, and then they hold it for a bit really effectively, because she obviously like throws is it flour or paint or something down to see if he's underneath her, and he's not underneath her, he's right in front of her, which is horrifying. But then the ladder is also gone, so it kind of drags out the scare when you don't know if he's still there or not. And she's having to dangle completely like vulnerable from the trapdoor. This is not any kind of analysis of the film. It's just me telling you that I was terrified. I was like, girl, get down!
This is why we do not have attics. I actually have an attic, and I often think about that scene every time I look up on it.
I have an attic, and there's no stairs, and it's deliberate. I'm like, nobody's ever getting up there.
You have an attic?
Yeah.
Where? I'm looking around her flat right now.
You're on the bottom floor, so obviously you can't see it. It's upstairs.
Okay, I'm going to need to visit it.
Well, there's no way to get in there.
Is it after you watched Invisible Man that you took away the stairs? Is that what happened?
Well, any other horror film, to be fair. I mean, it's hardly the first film to use that trope, but fair play, it really does work. Well. It does.
Yeah.
Or the tap. So that entire sequence, when you know he's in the house with her, it's just horror cliche after horror cliche, and
it works.
It's so good.
The cliche is for a reason.
He turns the tap on. Happens in every freaking horror movie. I was scared.
Yeah, the steamed up bathroom. Great cliche.
Very good.
But also, I love, maybe it's just because I've got house fever, but the house, Adrian's house at the start, is coded like such a prison. And such a particular kind of male prison, in the sense that it is in so many ways, it is the slick, high-tech, highly personalized, and completely impersonal mansion or ode to a tech bro's success. While at the same time, it feels and is an actual prison for Cecilia's character. The fact that everything there is so clearly his, owned by him, presented to his taste, to his rhythms of living. And
Even the dog.
And she has to, and this is obviously because that in that first scene she's escaping, which is pretty much the same escape route that Julia Roberts does in Sleeping with the Enemy. And she has to literally hide away, not just for practical reasons, but I can also imagine that she had to hide away any semblance of a personality or her own things or her own items that were not bought or controlled by him in these little hidey holes that she discovered in this highly slick mansion. And there's no homeliness to it. You get a sense that people don't live there. They just, everything is delivered to them in this supposedly very optimized way, but that has no soul to it and no feeling. Happiness does not exist in that house.
No, and it's always nighttime when we're there, is it? Or there's one day scene, but it always feels just very dark and oppressive, despite having these massive windows everywhere.
Yeah, and that can be very oppressive in itself, because it feels like it's a house that would shut down on you, but there's no locks. There's no locks, there's no door handles. There's like no way to get out unless you control the app that controls the house.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying in a different way.
You are waiting for, because there's 2 escape scenes from that house. And both times you're waiting for like an Indiana Jones-esque sort of door to come down to stop her, but it doesn't need to, because he knows that he has control of the situation. You know, it doesn't need the trips and tricks. I like, though, that even while we're talking about this, so much of it is implied. I really admire the scene where she sits down to explain what's happened to her. The film does not... It does the opposite of a Verhoeven. We ain't seeing no tits here. It's like, did he hit you? Amongst other things, that's all you're getting. It's not going to revel in the gore or the pain or the kind of pornography of that. So yeah, even talking about any element of this film, so much of it is things that you either assume or you imagine.
And it also deals with surveillance in such an interesting way. Because I find that having been watching a lot of these films in sequence, like in chronological order, it's really interesting how stalking and surveillance and how those go hand in hand are really something that has come up in the 2000s, basically. Kind of as surveillance cameras, CCTV, the internet, and our reality TV and our change to being on camera on a daily basis has shifted. And I wonder what you think about the way that surveillance is presented in this film.
I also wonder.
Because I think it's quite clever, because it somewhere sits in between what we expect of a found footage, paranormal activity, Big Brother kind of surveillance, where we see people, we know that we're looking at them through a device. There's a little bit of that in the escape scene, right? Where we're seeing her through the surveillance cameras, and she has clearly like memorized where they're placed, what their angles are, so she can move between them in the blind spots. But in the real tense scenes in the film, we're basically just looking at an empty chair that may or may not be empty. We're looking at a corner in a room where we cannot see anything, but we intuit and suspect that there might be someone standing there. So it's actually like watching the experience of feeling surveilled, but without any proof that the surveillance is happening, which is creepy.
Yeah, or the experience of surveilling. Like, we're almost watching security tapes looking for the criminal in the corner.
But without the camera in between. There is no in between, which makes it so much more threatening. Because the person surveilling you is literally there in the room with you.
I think the more ominous elements of surveillance are, because as you say, that's quite done, that trope of viewing people through cameras. For me, what I found quite disturbing is the knowledge he has of everything she's doing. So the knowledge of like her financial records and her emails and her messages, and like she doesn't have communication that he doesn't see, and that's all. Sometimes he's writing it, and that is such a violation that I don't see captured because it's not very cinematic very often. Whereas obviously viewing someone through a camera is very cinematic.
And that technological coercion, I think, is the most interesting way that it actually uses technology. Because there's the invisibility suit. Great, you've solved one narrative problem.
I don't understand the invisibility suit.
It's a suit that makes you invisible.
But why is it cameras facing outward? It's time for Ruby and Anna to do science again.
Ruby and Anna Science Corner. I'm sitting up. I'm basically going to parrot what the film says, which does not mean I have a degree in this. Is in the way that it... I'm too sick to explain it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Not that I don't know what I'm talking about. The problem is that I'm going to
knowledge.
Isn't it that it's cameras facing outwards because it's reflecting and capturing light, and it can do it so quickly, and it's such specific and detailed like fluctuations of aperture and shutter speed that it will always adjust to whatever the light conditions are, so you're seeing right through it? You're going to say sure.
I am going to say sure. I like that you used the word aperture.
Shutter speed?
Shutter speed?
Yes.
It's sexy.
Yeah, very technical terms. Okay, this is the end of the Science Corner. I like the fact that it's something that has some semblance of connection to real life technology that we have had for at least 100 years, versus it's a serum that makes your bones go invisible.
Yes.
It's simple enough that we can be like, yeah, okay, cool. It's a suit that makes you invisible. You put it on and then you can see the person wearing the suit. And it's a very clever plot device because you know that there's going to be more than one suit. So
I'm profoundly stupid. So,
but then that's
when she does the reveal that it's not him, I'm like, what? But where is he? Because I know he's here.
But that works. That works so well. It's so simple. Of course, it'd be more than one suit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think about what do you think about the ending? And does it feel satisfying for you that Cecilia does what she does?
Oh, hell yeah. I actually love the ending. We kind of touched on some of the reasons already. So I love that the brother is then at that point not just complicit and kind of a weak little younger brother who goes along with whatever his brother. He's an actual murderer. Like, fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck him. But he's also a victim of his brother.
I don't agree.
I'm not excusing him, but he is also a victim of Adrian's like tactics and abuses.
I took him as just being. I took that as a reveal that he wasn't so much a spineless dweeb. He's actually, or that the spineless dweeb can be just as harmful as the quote unquote evil character. So I liked that he turned out to be a murderer too. More murderous.
Also, murderers are okay when they're indivisible man, but not in Hollow Man. Why am I defending Hollow Man?
I don't think you are. I think that the reveal of Adrian is... Okay, so I'm actually in two minds because once again I find the casting odd.
Okay. What do you mean?
He's not very threatening. And he's got a weird accent. It's not quite... I'm like...
Oliver Jackson Cohen?
Because he's English, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he sounds convincingly American at all.
Okay. I like him a lot, so...
Okay, fine.
Yeah. But then again, I think... I want to hear your thoughts about the casting before I share mine.
I don't really know why they cast a sort of young, attractive guy who doesn't have that much presence. Sorry to Oliver, whatever his name is, fans.
That is me.
I mean, I'm sure there's reasoning for it, but in the same way that I think Elizabeth Moss is a surprising choice, I think he's a surprising choice because he doesn't look like Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. No, I hear you. Again, I'm going to go to bat for the casting here because I think it's quite deliberate. Because, so I know him because he plays one of the lead, also villainous roles in The Haunting of Bly Manor by, as you know, my number one guy, Mike Flanagan. Mm. And he's quite menacing in that. Mm. And I do find him quite menacing because of his like very traditionally attractive good looks. He's very tall, he's very broad. I've met him in person, he's very tall and very broad. So it's like physically he's quite imposing on someone who is quite petite, like Elizabeth Moss. Like she's teeny tiny. And we don't really see them on screen together too much. But I can see that is already like a key part of their physicality in the casting. The other thing is I think we don't see him very much at all until the final scene in person. We just see pictures of him. And he looks like every tech bro who goes to get a good haircut, does up his eyebrows, gets a fashionable beard, and like looks hot just because he has the money to pay for himself to get a glow up. Mm. So I actually think that they cast someone who is traditionally good looking is quite deliberate, but also unknown enough that it's not like you cast...
It's not a reveal.
No, it's not a reveal that it's like, oh, it was Javier Bardem all along.
That would have been good though.
No, because like if you saw his image on the TV when they were reporting about his death, you'd be like, oh, I can't wait to see Javier Bardem pop up again. You'd be like, oh, it's just some random guy. No offense, Haunting of Bly Manor.
It's not about him.
It's not about him at all. It's about her. So the fact that he's not as big a name as Elizabeth Moss or not as recognizable, I think was very, very deliberate. Yeah. Because I think then there's also this thing of, if you want to get really kind of social analytical about it, it could be anyone. It could be the good-looking guy, the successful guy, the guy with the big tech empire, the guy with the big fancy house. The really good-looking, broad-shouldered guy could also be a hideous domestic abuser. I think that's part of the intention of the casting. What's really interesting to me is in that final scene, when he does get to act against her, is that he's almost clawing and begging, and he's so disgusting.
Oh, it's very effective.
It is extremely so, and pulling off that against someone,
the extreme kind of delusional audacity and narcissism of these men to believe that after you've murdered her sister in front of her,
but I did it all for you.
That not like this idea that he's going to go back to, oh, I've got her where I want her because she can't actually escape, so she'll definitely love me again. It's like, what's the leap in logic here? Fucking lunatic. So that is really scary, the way that he actually seems to believe that this plan is going to all work out for the best and there's going to be no consequences. Because what kind of social circumstances have allowed this man to believe that? So that is very effective. And the fact that you actually just also consider the possibility that she will.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever consider the possibility that she would?
Not seriously.
Mm. I mean, that would have been a devastating ending if the film just cut when she was just eating, I think they were eating sushi in that final scene.
I don't think it's entirely ruled out for, and I think that that's to the film's credit that kind of plays with that a little bit. But it's hugely satisfying on two levels. One, the fact that she finally outsmarts him, and we love a murder, as we've established, like good. I also like that because the film is so about believability. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it really irritates me when you have like a not all men character. Like the good guy who does believe someone, but I feel like Aldous Hodge's character is so not that. Like, he really is on the fence for a long time, and I find it weirdly emotionally satisfying, that final moment where he decides to back her. It's like, yes, friendship wins. So happy.
But there's also something kind of, I think this was what the entire film shows us is that he will not let go of her. Even in death, whether it's fake or real, you can imagine that he has found ways to continue abusing her even after he's gone. Like, I'm sure there's plans put in place so that others can continue coercing, keeping his control over her even after he's gone.
Oh, that's a sad interpretation.
No, but wait, I'm not done yet. So I can understand the reason why her murdering him is the only way that she can get away. Like, the only way that she can get away is genuinely eliminating him.
Yes.
And his network.
That murder feels extremely justified, and not just in a fist punch, yay, go girl moment, as in like, no, that's what had to happen. There was no other option.
No, exactly. But there is also an element of but it's sad that she had to be reduced to this, that she had to do this and become a murderer herself. Completely justified, I'm with you. But there's an element of this is another thing that you've taken from her. You forced her into this corner where she has to commit murder, commit this atrocious act of violence, because there is no other escape route available. And she's tried every single escape route to just get away, and you won't let her. So there's an element of there's something in her that breaks, that he's broken, and that is what she has to do.
I don't see it as being broken at the end, actually. I mean, I see what you're saying, but because of the performance, I think she's very steely in the final scenes, and she goes in with a clear plan. And that, that final conversation where she's like, what did it sound like to you? There's no, the scared girl from before is gone in that moment, and she feels very self-assured to me. So I obviously agree that if one has the choice not to do murders, that would be better. But I think that weirdly in this circumstance, that extreme act is what was kind of almost needed to reset for her. Because it's a demonstration of you cannot deny, I'm a survivor here. I have won. You are dead.
Yes, but I think the steeliness comes from, and this is a very sad interpretation, I think the steeliness comes from the realization that no matter how much proof she brings, she will not be believed. Or the question, the the onus of proving that what she was saying is true is always going to be on her and not on him.
It's true.
And that, I think, is where that final steeliness comes from. And even the question back of like, what did it seem like to you? She's no longer going to volunteer the truth of her her experience. She's just going to do what needs to be done in order for her and hers to be safe, even if that includes a bit of murder. And I think that's really sad, because everything that we see throughout the film, and again, I harken back to The Entity because it's a really good example of how horror does this as well, is her doing everything that she can to just protect herself and save herself without hurting anyone. And everyone around her, all the institutions around her, as well as the figures of authority, disbelieving her, or disbelieving her assume at the smallest crack in quote unquote her story.
I completely understand that interpretation, and it's not that I don't have a different interpretation so much as I think that final question is not her saying, I'm no longer giving you anything. I think it's her testing the waters, and she does get that belief. That's why it really works for me, is somebody does believe her. It's just an individual, and I think you've tapped into something really important, which is that the institutions and structures are never going to facilitate that freedom for her. But an individual can offer her a glimpse, like that's the comfort. You're not going to get it from an institution, but you can get it from your friend. And so the fact that he, as a representative of authority, doesn't say explicitly, I believe you, but he does believe her, feels like an important moment of kind of empowerment for her, to me.
This film is now a few years old, and I still think it's one of the best examples that illustrate the question of believing women. How do you think the film engages with the politics of belief, especially post Me Too?
So I think there's sort of two elements to that. It gives you a very effective example of, well, of course this can't be true because it goes against everything I know to be fact. Being confronted with something that is true, but which denies everything that you thought previously was true. Of course he can't be alive. I've been told there's a body. It is scientifically impossible for someone to be invisible. You are lying with valid reason. The parallel that it draws for me is we all theoretically love to say we believe women, right, as a concept. But often when people are confronted with the reality of believing women, they don't. And often that's because it denies everything that they previously held to be true. So if somebody comes to you and says, our mutual friend is abusing me, that is a conflict into truths that I hold dear. I love that friend. I believe them to be a good person. You're telling me they're not. You must be lying. So I think if you extrapolate the way the film approaches it, again, it kind of, and as an audience member, put yourself into their shoes, you might not like what you see when you think about what would I do in that scenario. But I think it's a very effective way to then make you take away, how does this apply to the actual world? I think it also gives us a really excellent example of a sort of imperfect victim. Cecilia is shown to be paranoid when she escapes. The scene when she calls for James to come and help her is in the middle of the night, and there is no evidence that there's someone there. Of course, it reads as she's just had a nightmare. So there are lots of clever ways that it shows a woman saying something that is true that it just doesn't appear to be because of her mental state, which is quite a difficult thing to navigate with empathy and with nuance, I think. And it's something that we really struggle when we're looking at news of these cases to kind of understand. So this, showing us a victim behaving like a victim, but being 100% true and being on her side throughout, I think that's really powerful.
I completely agree. And would also just add that by staying with Cecilia, even in the moments that then are cast into doubt about whether they're real or supernatural or what have you, it constantly illustrates that it illustrates how long and how many things happen and how intense those moments of paranoia, tension, and fear, and suspicion, and self-suspicion as well.
It's really relentless.
It's relentless. It's constant. Even when Adrian is declared dead, we don't know whether he's dead yet or not, but allegedly he's dead. That is not a moment of relief. None of the tension or the fear goes away after he's no longer there, after she's not in his house, after she's got this financial freedom. It's constant. And a lot of the times it's when she's by herself in a room. And by illustrating those moments and by creating horror moments out of those solitary scenes, it kind of puts her in her psyche. So even if it is just in her head, if that is a question mark, even if it's just in her head, it's still an awful place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth of her experience becomes undeniable through the filmmaking. Because even if Adrian is not an invisible man, even if he's not in the corner staring at her, even if he's not policing her through her brother, the state that he's put her in after years of abuse and controlling behavior is now evident in every single moment that she's awake.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I think it's so subtle and emotionally smart about the scripting and the direction, is that whatever it is, it's very clear cut. She is right. She has people who disbelieve her and then some choice ones who don't. There is an invisible suit and he is stalking her. But whatever it might be, that even after Adrian is dead, that might not go away for a long time or possibly ever. Because it's very difficult to shed that sense of fear and tension and of being coerced and observed and judged on a constant basis, even when the person who is doing that is no longer in the room or even in the world. That is why I think it hits very differently, kind of on a gut level, because I think Elizabeth Moss's performance has that. Even when the dialogue is not saying it, the direction and her performance are so constantly in sync that Cecilia's view of the world is completely marred and tainted by her experience of Adrian.
I think the gut word is really important, because I think you're just reminding me again of these unique interventions that horror can make, because it's not unique to have a film that is about the experience of a domestic abuse survivor, but everything you've just described, it is relentless, and it's quite difficult to sit through 2 hours of that normally. It can be quite draining and quite it's quite difficult to keep your audience engaged with just endless misery. What the film does really well is it uses these kind of moments of horror and tension to inject sort of new emotions into it. The one that I'm particularly thinking about is when he hits Sydney, but you'd think that brings up like just a sheer rage in the audience. You cannot believe he would have the audacity to do that, and then that she's being blamed. You feel her righteous anger in that moment, but you also feel like so much empathy for her and so much horror. And then the house scene that we've already talked about is so terrifying. The escape scene is so frustrating. There are all these different ways that these kind of heightened cinematic moments bring us back into our bodies and our emotional response to the film. So if you're feeling a little bit like, the intellectual weight of this, of like her sitting in a room being scared of her dead partner, is interrupted, and you're forced back to the kind of the empathy. It's just a very good film.
Stands up very well. 5 stars. Did it again. A
simple premise, well executed. That's all you need. You don't need no damn Plato.
I genuinely think I think is one of the most. I don't think he gets enough props for how. I think he gets a lot of props, but his scripts and his takes, particularly on like the classic stories, like The Wolfman. I have a lot of time for The Wolfman, and this one, an Upgrade. Like I think he really zeroes in on what scares a character, as opposed to trying to find things that will scare an audience. By finding what terrifies a character, that can then just through sheer empathy, with the performances and with the story, it then becomes scary. But it's never actually about Adrian, or it's never actually about the invisible suit, or even the hubris of the mad scientist who gets away with creating something like that.
Well, what I quite like about Adrian is he doesn't have that supernatural threat that a lot of even Hollow Man does. Like, for some reason, Sebastian is weirdly strong. It's never explained.
It's a serum.
But also, he uses his quote unquote genius to get himself out of situations, to trap people, etc. There's an element of that with the house being built for Adrian, but he just feels like a man in a suit.
He just feels with a man with a lot of financial power.
Yes.
And I think the constant, we've spoken a little bit about it, but the financial coercion of things is so definitely explored in this. Because it's not the sexiest or the most cinematic thing to talk about, right? It's like, what do you do when you have no money of your own? Where do you go? What do you do if you can't have a job? What do you do if you have a 10-year gap on your resume that you can't explain? And I think it kind of really...
Oh God, I've forgotten when she opens her portfolio and there's nothing in there. Oh, honey! No!
But it's such a huge mechanism of control. And I think the most revealing thing about Adrian is that we don't actually spend a lot of time talking about like how amazing his company or his inventions are. It's like, he's just filthy rich.
Oh, yeah.
He's just
What's he do?
really rich.
Optics? What's that mean? No one knows.
I don't care.
Who gives a shit?
No one cares. The main manifestation that we see is the fact that he has a lot of money. And that money allows him to buy anything.
And to use it as a tool to discredit her. Because obviously she was just after his money.
Exactly.
I've left her all this money. That was what she was after the whole time. Maybe she killed him.
I think he is...
Fuck Adrian.
Genuinely.
Fuck Adrian.
He deserves his end. You know what he deserves? He deserves to be put in his invisible suit after his death and just thrown somewhere where nobody can see him, nobody can find him.
No news coverage for you, Adrian.
None. I think we've fully buried both Adrian and Sebastian.
We've gone on for ages now. I can only apologize.
Is there anything else about the Invisible Man, possibly Hollow Man, that you wanted to mention that we haven't gotten to?
I don't know that there is, because I feel like the other points I was going to make are not very good. I think I've made the good ones.
Okay. Do you have any final jokes you want to make at Hollow Man's expense?
Stupid. We didn't even talk about the rape scene. There's a lot to slag off in that film.
You know that the rape scene was allegedly longer and they cut it down because of test screenings?
I think it's hilarious when you see the quotes about that, because they're kind of claiming like, well, unfortunately we had to make it less,
unfortunately,
less disgusting. I'm like, what? Scene are you watching now?
I tell you what, it's not defensible. The only thing that justifies the Hollow Man for me is the fact that it's such a time capsule of a very, very aggressively and overtly misogynistic time in our pop culture.
Yeah, it's the page 3 era. The zoo and nuts era. Sorry, you weren't living in England at this time.
What is that?
They were magazines that had topless women on them that were just like the main sources of news.
Oh.
And FHM.
I did have that in Spain, yes.
So we had like we had about 10 FHMs.
Oh, wow.
So Jesus, when I went into the newsagents as a 10-year-old, there would be an entire row of tits. And a lot of celebrities who were just quote-unquote glamour models. So it was a very specific time of like bro and ladette culture. That was the counter. It was women who got in on the misogyny.
They're on board.
Yeah.
I do think that is genuinely the only thing that is helpful. Well, I think genuinely that is the only piece of value of Hollow Man is the fact that it is it really does reflect the culture of its time so extremely.
What is that quote when I think he says, "I could suck the tits right off you"?
Yes. Lovely script writing.
What does that even mean?
No.
What?
They just really like tits in the 2000s. It was we're in an ass era.
Everyone
That was a
likes
tits
there's
era.
nothing not to like about tits.
It's true.
But, the tits are not the problem. Kevin Bacon is not the problem, and the tits are not the problem. Paul Verhoeven is the problem.
The other inconsistency that the film never explores? If your entire body is transparent, invisible, right?
Yeah.
How can you sleep? Are your eyelids transparent?
No, it does address it quite a lot.
Did I miss that?
He complains about it a lot.
Does he?
Because he's a whiny little baby. This guy is only invisible for 1 week.
I never listened to Sebastian.
When he starts, going insane. 1 week? You can't handle 1 week that you brought upon yourself? Are you fucking joking me?
He kills an invisible dog.
Imagine this man in COVID. He would have absolutely lost his mind, even more than is already hanging on by an edge. He does talk about it because that's what the first thing that he's a whiny little baby about. Is we have to turn the lights out because I can't shut my eyes.
What is that voice? Where is
That's
that
my Kevin Bacon impression.
That is that sounds like a Victorian ghost child.
I think that's what he sounds like. Mummy!
That's a very different film than we watch.
Here's the bit that I like in Hollow Man. There's one bit. I like when she makes a magnet to open the door.
Yeah, that was crafty.
Why did they cast Josh Brolin as a good guy? It's still a weird choice.
No, why did they cast Josh Brolin as a nerd who always takes his shirt off and is incredibly
so
buff?
Not believable. I mean, I guess that's the only thing it has to its credit is that the objectification of scientists is pangender.
That is very true. Everyone gets their top off. Listen, I'm glad. I'm hoping someone paid off their mortgage because of this film.
Did they?
I don't know. I'm hoping it was Kevin Bacon.
Why do you think Paul Verhoeven disowned it? Because it feels very much like Paul Verhoeven to me. Also, did you know William Goldman did a rewrite of the script and he was like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep my shit version. You've only got yourself to blame, Paul.
I think he disowned it partly because it's not fun. I think, like you were mentioning before, his films always have they're very extreme, they're very on the nose, but they always have an element of lightness to them that never ever feels like it's exploitation. And this one feels like it's a big budget exploitation.
I don't know that I personally agree that they don't feel like exploitation, but
Have you ever watched RoboCop recently? That's a very sad film.
I like RoboCop.
Starship Troopers is
Full
fun.
stop. Showgirls is fun.
His films are fun. Basic Instinct
They
is
are
fun.
quite fun, but I do think they still feel exploitative even when they're being fun. The two can coexist.
Only
They just
Paul
don't
Verhoeven
coexist in
films.
Hollow Man.
No, genuinely a really unpleasant film.
Unpleasant.
Sticks to your skin in a really gross way.
Mm-mm. We do not recommend that you rewatch it. Nobody listening to this has even seen this film in 20 years. I'm
Good.
sure.
Keep it that way.
Exactly.
It's bad. Go
Yeah.
watch Stir of Echoes instead. It's another Kevin Bacon horror film. Or just watch Footloose.
Watch Footloose. Go on. Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Ruby, thank you so much.
My pleasure as always.
Always a joy to have you on the show.
I
Especially
think I
because
should be credited as a friend of the show next time because I've now been on enough.
I love that you're requesting it.
Yeah.
You've listened to the episodes and noted down that sometimes I refer to people as friend of the show.
Yeah.
Okay. I really appreciate you will get that on this episode.
Stop.
Yes. Also, I love that you take the time to do this because I know that you hate being perceived on the internet, but now you exist on the internet.
Well, there's been so far no backlash, so.
I would keep that away from you if there was any.
Oh, okay, so there has been.
No, but now the seed of doubt is planted in you.
Fuck you, Adrian.
Before I let you go, is there any place where you would like to direct listeners to discover more of your work?
Yeah, come watch some melodrama movies. That's not going to happen for months, but come to the BFI South Bank between the months of October and December and have a cry, as we've talked about it today.
Excellent time. I mean, it's always good to have a cry in a cinema.
I do it most days, regardless of the content of the film.